The Princess Mouse. Once there was a farmer with two sons. One morning he said to them,
"Boys, you're old enough now to marry, but in our family we have our own way to choose a bride."
The younger son listened respectfully, but the older one said,
"You have told us, father, we must each cut down a tree and see where it points." "That's right,"
said the farmer.
"That walk that way till you find a sweetheart. That's how we have done it, and that's how we always will."
Now the older son already knew who he wanted to marry. He also knew how to cut a tree so it fell how he wanted. So his tree fell and pointed to the farm where his sweetheart lived. The younger son, whose name was Miko, didn't have a sweetheart, but he thought he'd try his luck in the town. Well, maybe he cut the tree wrong, or maybe it had thought of its own, but it fell pointing to the forest.
"Good job, Miko,"
his brother mocked.
"What sweetheart will you find there? A wolf or a fox?" "Never mind,"
said Miko.
"I will find who I find."
The two young men went their ways. Miko walked through the forest for the hours without seeing a soul, but at last he came to a cottage deep in the woods. Suara Mikonya kamu lagi.
"I knew I did find a sweetheart,"
said Miko. But when he went inside, he saw no one.
"All this way for nothing,"
he said sadly. "Maybe not," came a teeny voice. Miko looked around, but the only living thing in sight was a little mouse on a table. Standing on its hind legs, it gazed him with large and bright eyes.
"Did you say something?"
he asked. "Of course I did. Now, why don't you tell me your name and what you came for?" Miko had never talked with a mouse, but he felt it only polite to reply.
"My name is Miko, and I have come looking for a sweetheart."
The mouse squealed in delight. "Why, Miko, I'll gladly be your sweetheart."
"But you are only a mouse,"
said Miko. "That may be true," she said, "but I can still love you faithfully. Besides, even a mouse can be special. Come feel my fur." With one finger, Miko stroked the mouse's back.
"Why, it felt like velvet, just like the gown of a princess."
"That's right, Miko." And as he pet her, she sang to him prettily. "Miko's sweetheart will I be. What a fine young man is he. Gown of velvet I do wear, like a princess fine and rare." Miko looked into those large bright eyes and thought she really was quite nice for a mouse, and since he'd found no one else anyway, he said,
"All right, little mouse, you can be my sweetheart."
"Oh, Miko," she said happily. "I promise you won't be sorry." Miko wasn't so sure, but he just stroked her fur and smiled. When Miko got home, his brother was already there boasting to their father. my sweetheart.
My sweetheart has rosy red cheeks and long golden hair. Sound very nice,
said the farmer.
And what about yours, Miko? Yes, Miko. Ha 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 ha. Did you find a sweetheart with a nice fur coat?
Now Miko didn't want to admit his sweetheart was a mouse, so he said,
Mine wears a velvet gown like a princess.
His brother stopped laughing.
Well,
said the farmer,
it sounds like Miko 3 a good way too. But now I must taste both your sweethearts. Tomorrow you will ask them to weave you some cloth. Then you will bring it home to me. That's how we have done it. And that's how we always will.
They started out early next morning. When Miko reached the cottage in the woods, there was a little mouse on the table. She jumped up and down and clapped her tiny paws. Oh, Miko, I'm so glad you are here. Is this the day of our wedding? Miko gently stroked her fur.
Not yet, little mouse,
he said glumly. Why, Miko? You look so sad. What's wrong?
My father wants you to weave some cloth. But how can you do that? You are only a mouse.
That may be true, she said. But I'm also your sweetheart, and surely Miko's sweetheart can wave. But you must be tired from your walk. Why don't you rest while I work?
All right,
said Miko, yawning. He lay down on a bed in the corner, and the little mouse sang him a pretty lullaby. Miko's sweetheart will I be. What a fine young man is he. Clothes of linen I will leave. I'll be down when he must sleep. When the little mouse was sure that Miko was asleep, she picked up the sled bell on a cord and rang it. Out of mouse holes all around the room poured hundreds of mice. They all stood before the table gazing up at her. Hurry, she said. Each of you fetch a strand of the finest flax. The mice rushed from the cottage. Then 1, 2, 3, and back they were, each with a strand of flax. First they spun into yarn on the spinning wheel. Whir, 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 whir. Some worked the pedal, some fed the flax, some rode round with the wheel. Then they strung the yarn on the loom and wove it into the cloth. Swish-stung, swish-stung, swish-stung. Some worked the pedal, some rode the better. Some sailed the saddle back and forth. At least they cut the cloth from the loom and tucked in a nutshell. Now off with you, said the little mouse, and they all scrambled back to their mouse hole. Then she called, Miko, wake up! It's time to go home, and here's something for your father. Miko simply took the nutshell. He didn't know why his father should want such a thing, but he said,
Thank you, little mouse.
When he got home, his brother was proudly presenting the clothes from his sweetheart. The farmer looked it over and said,
Bapaknya. Strong and fairly even, good enough for simple folk like us. And where is yours, Miko?
Miko blushed and handed him a nutshell.
Look at that,
said his brother.
Miko asked for clothes, and his sweetheart gave him a nut.
But the farmer opened the nutshell and peered inside. Then he pinched at something and started to pull. Out came line, fine beyond belief. It kept coming too, yard after yard after yard. Miko's brother gaped with open mouth, and Miko did too.
There can be no better wafer than Miko's sweetheart,
declared the farmer.
But both your sweethearts will do just fine. Tomorrow you will bring them home for the wedding. That's how we have done it, and that's how we always will.
When Miko arrived at the cottage next morning, the little mouse jumped up and down. Miko, is this the day of our wedding?
It is, little mouse.
But he sounded more glum than ever. Why, Miko? What's wrong?
How can I bring home a mouse to marry? My brother and father and all our friends and neighbors will laugh and think I am a fool.
They might be think so indeed, she said softly. But Miko, what do you think? Miko looked at the little mouse, gazing at him so seriously with her large, bright eyes. He thought about how she loved him and cared for him.
I think you are as sweet as any sweetheart could be, so let them love and think what they like. Today you will be my bride.
Oh, Miko, you've made me the happiest mouse in the world. She rang her sleigh bell, and Miko and to Miko's astonishment, a large carriage raced into the room. It was made from a nutshell and pulled by 4 black rats. It was a mouse coachman sat in front and a mouse footman behind. Miko, said the little mouse, aren't you going to help me down? Miko lifted her from the table and set her in the carriage. The rats took off the carriage sped from the cottage, so that Miko had to rush to catch up. While he hurried along behind her, the little mouse sang a pretty song. Miko, sweetheart, will I be? What a fine young man is he! In a carriage I will ride when I got to be his bride. At last they reached the farm, and then the spot of the wedding. On the bank of a lovely, swift, flowing stream, the guests were already there, enjoying themselves. But as Miko came up, they all grew silent and stared at the little carriage. Miko's brother stood with his bride, gaping in disbelief. Miko and the little mouse went up to him.
That's the stupidest thing I ever saw,
said his brother, and with one quick kick sent the carriage, the rats, and the mice all into the stream. Before Miko could do a thing,
what have
Karen
you
before them away.
What have you done? You have killed my sweetheart. Are you crazy? That was only a mouse. She may have been a mouse, but she was also my sweetheart, and I really did love her.
When
He was.
he was about to swing at his brother, when his father called,
Miko, look!
all the guests were staring downstream and pointing and crying out in wonder. Miko turned and, to his amazement, saw 4 black horse-pulling carriages out of the stream. A coachman sat in front of the footman behind, and inside was a shocked but lovely princess in a gown of pearly velvet. The carriage rode up along the bank and stopped right before him. "Miko," said the princess, "aren't you going to help me down?" Miko stared blankly a moment, and then his eyes flew wide.
Are you the little mouse?
"I surely was," said the princess, laughing. "But no longer. A witch enchanted me, and the spell could be broken only by one brother who wanted to marry me and another who wanted to kill me. But, sweetheart, I need a change of clothes. I can't be wed at our wedding." And a grand wedding it was, with Miko's bride the wonder of all. The farmer could hardly stop looking at her. Of course, Miko's brother was a bit jealous, but his own bride was really quite nice, so he couldn't feel too bad. The next day, the princess brought Miko back to her cottage, but it was a cottage no longer. It was a castle with hundreds of servants, and they made their home happily. And if Miko and the princess had any son, you know just how they chose their bride. The end.